All right. Hello, brothers and sisters, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Welcome. I am Topher. This is Micah. And not pictured is Ammon, who may or may not show up. We're not sure. He was a bit unwell. And we are the two
brothers.
Three brothers minus one maybe this week. We are going to talk about our favorite insights from Come Follow Me this week. We come up with three each, and we're going to talk about them. And as always, we will provide everything we talk about tonight below the video in links. So there'll be the insights paper that we have, our insights that we've come up with that we're going to talk about. There's also going to be a paper of the readings this week, which is a culmination of the Come Follow Me manuals, the scriptures for this week, which are in gold, and the other church manuals, which are in purple. We also will be drinking some Pepsi from time to time, so hopefully that's okay with you. And all these things will be a nice one, easy to read document. Highly recommend you use it as a tool for study. It's very, very handy, very, very good way to study these things. And they are linked below the video, totally for free. And Micah's wife, Ashley, does the beautiful favor for us of reading through the whole thing and uploading it onto YouTube. So if you prefer to listen or watch, that's there as well. So we're grateful for that. So without further ado, the two or three brothers are coming at you.
That's right.
All right. So, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that now that it's really weird. I just had a really weird thought. And I thought, what are the odds in this group with 99% of people hating Pepsi and constantly mocking me liking Pepsi? What are the odds that me and Topher both like Pepsi? Like zero? I don't know.
That's some odds. And I'm going to talk about odds actually in this. That's actually a really good segue into that. It's my second insight.
Didn't know it.
So yeah, funny. Just so everyone knows, Ammon was and is on holiday. He was going to join us, but he also got a bit sick. So I don't know that he'll be coming, but he will try to. So he may pop in the middle of nowhere. All right, so it's me first. So my first insight number one. So, funny thing about this week's readings, I don't think I knew the story of Esther, or I, had maybe known it at one stage and totally forgot it. But this was all like reading it for the first time for me, so it was really, really fun actually, because it's a really good. It's from not knowing it, it's now probably one of my favorite stories. I've said that a few times. Some of my favorite stories would be Joseph in Egypt. There's a couple others, but this is a great story. And it's interesting, the church manual points out that God isn't mentioned once in the whole of the book of Esther, which is interesting. But there's obviously a lot to glean spiritually from it, but God is not even mentioned at all. So it's a very interesting thing. But it's a beautiful rags to riches tale, and I love the old rags to riches tales. That's the Joseph in Egypt style, with a twist, with a bit of a twist of vengeance, and I love that. And it's like all my favorite movies.
Count to Monte Cristo.
A good one. So I've told these guys before, all my favorite movies are all revenge. They all have a good bit of revenge, and all these rags to riches, revenge style things, or treasure hunting movies. I love those too. But anyway. So I was reading this, and it was just a really great, take the spiritual side away, it's a great story. Yeah. And I also couldn't help but imagine the movie 300 the whole time, because of King Xerxes, and it's the Persians, and it's, there's all these, and I'm thinking the whole time, imagining the movie 300. So anyway, great time. Very cool story. Anyway, on to my point. So Mordecai, one of the big players in the readings this week. So he, as we will know, he saves the king's life by revealing an assassination plot upon him to Esther, his cousin, who reveals it to the king. And at this point, she's already the queen. So the assassins, well, I think she was the queen at that point. I'm pretty sure she was. So then the assassins get executed, and then the king at this stage doesn't do anything to Mordecai, just forgets about him. But at this stage, the king promotes a guy named Haman above everyone else, who becomes, second only to the king, I guess, or whatever. He's like super top dog. He gets promoted. And then Mordecai, he's asking everyone to bow to him, like he's a king, he's a whatever. And Mordecai refuses to bow to him. So, and that was a big deal. So in Esther, in the church manual for Esther 3 verses 1-6, there's a section called "Why Would Mordecai Not Bow to Haman?" And it says, there probably was nothing personal in Mordecai's refusal to bow to Haman. The only explanation offered is that Mordecai claimed exemption on the ground that he was a Jew. Probably the inference is justified that Haman was demanding not mere allegiance, but worship. And Mordecai would not break the first commandment. If fear of idolatry lay behind the refusal to bow down, then no Jew would bow down. And Haman's decision to take vengeance on the whole people becomes understandable. Bit crazy, but okay. Similar acts of revenge involving wholesale slaughter are recorded by Herodotus in some book somewhere. In Esther, however, anti-Semitism proper makes its appearance with Haman's express intention of wiping out the Jewish race. It's a very interesting pattern that keeps happening to these people. It might well seem incredible that one man's injured pride should lead to such an irrational conclusion if it were not that history has produced an equally irrational attack on the Jews in the 20th century. So we know from World War II. So it's a very funny end quote there. But it's a very funny thing that this pattern that keeps happening to the Jews, right, to the Lord's people. Okay, so my words now. So firstly, Haman is a classic case of unrighteous dominion, by the way. He gets into power and straight away wants to eradicate a whole race. So what a guy. Anyway, so Haman, as it says in that quote there, Haman was demanding not mere allegiance, but worship, likely. Funnily enough, just as an interesting side note, that is what Xerxes does in the movie 300, if you recall. He demands worship from the Spartans, and they refuse that in the movie as well. Anyway, enough with the movie 300. It's just some funny little bits. But okay, so the Israelites, or the Jews as they're now called in these chapters, have a certain stubborn obedience about them, a certain stubborn obedient quality about them, as we can sort of see through all the readings that we've read thus far this year. And sometimes they're stubborn in following the Lord's counsel, but when they do decide to do something, they do it wholeheartedly. And this is kind of this pattern that we see a lot. So a lot of the time they're too stubborn to do something, but when they turn around and actually go to do something, they do it wholeheartedly, and they do it forever, if given the chance to. They're still, for example, they're still celebrating Purim, which is the festival that we learn about in these readings, every year to this day. As also with the Passover and everything, they are very devout. They do what they say they're going to do, and they'll do it forever if there's nothing to stop them sort of doing that. So it is likely that Haman was demanding some form of worship, and Mordecai had the absolute resolute stubbornness, but in a good way, to refuse to bow down, even though no one would likely have blamed him for doing so. And he would have been breaking the first and second commandments, but no one would have blamed him because everyone else was probably already bowing down.
Except for those judgy members.
But it could be assumed, right, that everyone else was bowing down to Haman, and he stood alone. That's what the kind of the inference in this story is. So we can also see that when the Israelites and the Jews do something, they do it together. This is what Haman was afraid of. The quote in that quote, it says, if fear of idolatry lay behind the refusal to bow down, then no Jew would bow down. And Haman's decision to take vengeance on the whole people becomes understandable. A little extreme, if you ask me, but it's, I guess understandable if you're a guy with, serious unrighteous dominion issues. But as the quote also says, history has produced another equally irrational attack on the Jews, which we just mentioned. So Haman might have thought he ran the risk of wholesale defiance from all the Jews because they will all do it, right? If he let just this one slide. But Mordecai stood alone. It's an interesting point to note, well, as far as we know. But look what happened to Mordecai eventually. Due to his simple act of standing for what he believed, he eventually stood next to the king in power and might. So something that he had the bravery to do at this stage, although crazy, scary, hard, frightening, went through a lot of grief, a lot of insane things happened because of it. Look what the end result was. It would seem that if we study the events to come before the second coming, that we will be confronted more and more with the option to stand in defiance of evil or to bend, fold, and kneel to it. It is those who are willing to stand courageously for what is right that will become the jewels in the Lord's crown, or be crowned, or be saved if we're found on the watchtower, as we like to say. But it is those people who will be able to stand. Where I think you can almost guarantee it, that we're going to more and more be required to stand in defiance of certain things. And so will we do that, or will we crumble? Just a couple of quotes here before I finish this insight. So President Monson, in General Conference in 2011, he said, "As we go about living from day to day, it is almost inevitable that our faith will be challenged. We may at times find ourselves surrounded by others and yet standing in the minority or even standing alone concerning what is acceptable and what is not. Do we have the moral courage to stand firm for our beliefs, even if by so doing we must stand alone?" And the reason I wanted to include that is because it's just a good question to ask yourself. And then President Ezra Taft Benson said in 1987, "In all ages, prophets have looked down through the corridors of time to our day. Billions of the deceased and those yet to be born have their eyes upon us. Make no mistake about it, you are a marked generation. For nearly 6,000 years, God has held you in reserve to make your appearance in the final days before the second coming of the Lord. Some individuals will fall away, but the kingdom of God will remain intact to welcome the return of its head, even Jesus Christ. While this generation will be comparable in wickedness to the days of Noah, when the Lord cleansed the earth by flood, there is a major difference this time. It is that God has saved for the final inning some of his strongest children who will help bear off the kingdom triumphantly." That puts a bit of responsibility on us, if you think about what he's saying there.
Yeah.
So just lastly, why and how will we help bear off the kingdom triumphantly? Because we will not bow, we will not break, and we will not kneel to evil. If we are willing to stand like Mordecai, then we will certainly eventually receive the same inheritance that he did. We will inherit the power and might of our Father and our Savior. And that is it.
Amen. That's going to go really well with my point number 3. I love how these points always blend together. So
there's going to be a bit of that.
Yeah, I love how that, and we never know what the other person's going to say. I always love that. You just kind of study it and come together. And so the first thing that I thought was interesting when you were saying here is that Esther, so she's one of the stories that's actually covered in those Living Scripture animated series. So if you have those kind of, animated series for kids where they go over the scripture stories or whatever, they're in there. She's in there. And what's interesting about it is that, like, I would say 75% of the names that I pronounce a certain way is just because I hear them said in that movie that way. And so in the movie, it's Haman.
Yeah. So I wasn't sure. It could be.
Yeah. And so when you were saying it, I was like, what? I have no idea how to pronounce these words, but for some reason it's
Haman works.
Yeah, whenever there's a movie, for some reason I feel super confident in pronouncing the name. Like, oh, that's definitely how it's pronounced, but I have no idea. So it's kind of interesting that that even just listening to those movies in the background with my kids makes me seemingly more confident in how to pronounce names, which is one of those things where it's like when you're teaching your kids things and you think, it's just kind of child things, even then it's like you're gaining confidence by osmosis. So I think I said, I know this story. Anyway, I thought that's interesting. The second thing I thought was interesting was anti-Semitism. I thought this was interesting because I studying the Old Testament, I was wondering, when will it become anti-Semitism? When will it become anti-Jew? Because it was always the Lord's covenant people, and then it turns into the Hebrews, right? Then it's the Hebrews, then it's the 10 tribes. But when does it actually become the Jews? And I think it's interesting because they're starting to do it here, but we need to understand. We need to understand that I believe Mordecai was from the tribe of Benjamin. So once again, which I think we read in here if you did the readings, I think he was from the tribe of Benjamin, which is interesting.
I think you're right.
Which is interesting because now when we refer to the Jews, we're talking about the tribe of Judah. Like 99% of the time, we're just talking about the tribe of Judah. And it's like, they are the only Jews. They are it, right? So if you hate people that are from the tribe of Ephraim, it's not even racism, right? But if you hate people from the tribe of Judah, now it's anti-Semitism. And I think that's really interesting because it's like a family, right? If you think about a family, it's like they hated everyone in the family. And then all of a sudden it was like 9 people out of the family got kicked out, right? 10 tribes, let's say 9 are out. And then there's just like this one left. And we just kind of forget about the other ones. But it was like at one point in time, we used to stand side by side. We used to be hated all together. And I think that can kind of go both ways. I think that, sometimes we need to remember that Judah is our brother and we need to stand by them, but I think that also, on the other end, Judah needs to stop looking this like oppressed class, and Ephraim isn't a part of us or all those other tribes, right? Like they need to understand that, hey, we're part of the family too. And we need to understand that we're part of the family too, right?
I like that. That.
Like Benjamin and these people, like if it wasn't for Benjamin, like the tribe of Benjamin here, a lot of the Hebrews, if not all the Hebrews there, would have been wiped out. Like that'd have been it, game over. And when he was coming, when Haman was coming to, with this plot to kill them all, he wasn't just going to try to kill the tribe of Judah. It was all of them. He didn't care what tribe you were from. I mean, if you were part of the Hebrews, those group, you're gone. And so I thought that was interesting. The last thing he said, we have to stand. We were talking about standing into 2 different groups. And I thought it's already getting to the point in time where things that I thought would almost to a fault be, just taught in the church and be easily understood and you could easily rally behind, like the seminary answers, are becoming controversial. And I've talked about this before. I feel like even something like follow the prophet, if you just teach follow the prophet now, it feels like you're standing alone. Like it genuinely feels like you say, well, yeah, follow the prophet. And then 15 people want to be like, well, here's 10 examples about why you shouldn't follow the prophet. And here's 4 examples of, in the last 5 years, examples where the prophet said to do something that I don't agree with. And it's like, I'm not trying to bring up any specific example here. I'm just trying to teach a principle that we need to follow the prophet, right? I'm not trying to harbor up or conjure up some image in your mind of some specific counsel of the prophet. I'm just saying we need to follow the prophet, right? And for some reason, like we're now standing alone on those issues, let alone things that are becoming like. So if I stood up and said, follow the prophet, how many people would rally behind me in my congregation? How many people would rally behind you online? You say, hey, I believe in the family proclamation of the world, which means that only a man and a woman can be married. Like, read the document. That's what it says. How many people do you think are going to agree with you on that? And so, you're talking about standing alone. It's interesting. I feel like you're standing alone. Righteous people are standing alone already, because I don't know what the percentages are, but I know what the percentages of people that open their mouth are. And if you're not going to open your mouth, you might as well not hold the belief, because you're just getting condemned for not standing up for it. So even if the proportions are still 70-30 or something, and 70% stand behind the family proclamation of the world. That is not what it comes across online. It's not what it comes across in your seminary classes. It's not what it comes across like in institute and in the church. It's not like that. You'll have 30% that are against it, that are very, very vocally against it. And then you'll maybe have 10 to 15% that'll stand in opposition to it. And so once again, I don't know what the percentages are. And even if they're in our favor, the people that are not opening their mouth are making it not good. So we need to not only be standing alone, but we need to be willing to open your mouth. It doesn't do you any good to be sitting in those pews and have a testimony of the family proclamation of the world when you don't stand up and bear your testimony of it when it's under attack. It does absolutely nobody no good. And that's what the Savior said. If you have a light, you would never put it under a bushel. That is not what you're supposed to do. You are commanded to let that light shine. And so I think standing alone is a big thing, but we also, part of that standing alone is that we need to have people that open their mouth.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. It's like what we've believed our whole lives, they're obvious commandments, right? Like, of course, you follow the prophet, right? Of course, the family unit is God's like ideal family unit. Like, we have this proclamation to the world, which when that came out was obvious.
Yep.
Really obvious, to the point where people are like, well, what do we need this for? We already know this. Most of the world actually believes this still. Gay marriage was a long way away from being sort of allowed, at that point. But it's a very interesting point that the things that we have always found as obvious are now not obvious, apparently, to the majority. Or I guess maybe they are still for the majority, but like you say, there's this growing proportion of people where, I could go on all day about this, but I have a lot of friends who have left the church because of the church's stance on the family, the proclamation of family, which, they grew up the same as me. They're the same age as me. We grew up with the same things, went through primary and all these things together, and we got the same beliefs, but like for some reason now that's become this huge stick in the craw there, where they can't get over that. Even though they grew up with, I would assume, believing that. So, and like I say, following the prophet is another big one, where to me it's like an obvious do, an easy do, really, most of the time. And somehow that has become not obvious as well. It's a very interesting, very, very interesting point. But if you think about what Ezra Taft Benson said there, billions of deceased and those yet to be born have their eyes on us, And I was thinking of that the other day, and I was like it's crazy. One day I'm going to have this. I was actually thinking about this, right? So I grew up with a kid in my neighborhood, and he was a very quiet kid, and we'd hang out from time to time, and we'd play some games and bits and pieces. And anyway, as he grew older, he went to high school before I did. He was a few years older than me. We grew apart, and I'd see him on the street sometimes, and he wouldn't even, he was a very quiet dude. He wouldn't even look at me. But anyway, he slipped over in the shower and died. Right, crazy random thing. He hit his head in the shower, had a brain aneurysm, and died. Right.
Wow.
Random thought that I had, I think it was yesterday, was that, and this could be applied to anything, but the thought that I had was, one day I'm going to see this guy again, and he's going to know that I was a member of the church. And I was young. It's not necessarily my responsibility at that point to say, hey, come to church, or maybe it was, I don't know. But this is the thought process that I'm having, right? So what I'm relating this to is Ezra Taft Benson and the billions of people looking at us, right? From either in the past looking forward to our time, or from those coming right now that are also waiting to join our time. And it's our responsibility to share these things that we know to be true and to stand up for them, as to make your point. And anyway, it was a random thought that I had, that one day this guy is going to know the same religion that I know, right? The same things that I know, and whether or not he accepts it or whatever, that's up to him. And but not necessarily in his case, but in the responsibility is mine to make sure that everyone I come into contact with, if there's any opportunity, that I stand for what I believe. Oh,
she keeps jumping on my keyboard.
And that's why you're swearing in the chat. All these swear words are coming up in the chat room. But yeah, that we, it's my responsibility to stand up for what I believe, because, you never know. Firstly, you never know how long you've got around someone and what effect you're going to have on them. But one day they will know and you will know. You're going to have a recollection and an understanding. And so it's our responsibility to stand up for these things that we believe to be true. Simple things which are no longer so simple or obvious. Yeah.
Are now under attack.
Anyway. Yeah.
Amen. I'm with you 100%. And I get, and I think about people in my youth that the individual in my youth, one of the biggest wake up moments of my life, man, where I was like, I'm never going to have that feeling again. But
yeah, I remember that story.
Yeah. And what other thing that's interesting is that if you're willing to open your mouth, the Lord will put some very interesting opportunities in your path. So I just thought of one where Ashley actually is now training an individual as a pharmacist who is from or just came from, I think it's actually from St. George, Utah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Random.
one of the odds. And so I told Ashley, she's like, well, how do I bring it up? And I was like, wait, so this is how I would do it. I would just say, wow, you left Utah to get away from all those Latter-day Saints, and now you're being trained by one. Isn't that crazy?
That's a good one.
Yeah. And then see what she says. See what she says. See if she's like, what? I'm a member too. See what happens. But
yeah.
But if not,
if you're from St. George, she's either going to be one or no one.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And so it's like you have these people put in your life for a specific time, specific reason. And if you kind of get you tested, right? Like, are you going to say something with these easy balls, right? Like these soft balls, are you going to do something? And then it's going to be harder and harder ones. But so anyway, Ashley, if you're listening to this, don't get scared.
It's your responsibility.
Your responsibility. Yeah, exactly. Bring up your faith. So, all right. Should I go into number one?
Yeah.
The kittens jumped away, so I'm no longer swearing. Okay. Was actually typing in the paper, the document?
It doesn't seem to have. But
okay,
we might come across some words we don't understand, and then
we might. Okay, yeah. If that's the case, I'm blaming it on Kat. Okay, because she is just she is an attention grabber. She just wants all the attention. Okay, so my first insight here, in the church's student manual 31-1 introduction, it says Esther's beauty was such that it could catch and hold the eye of an Oriental emperor accustomed to being surrounded by loveliness. Combined with physical charms were qualities of spirit that revealed that she had inward beauty as well. The qualities were loyalty, love, dedication, submissive yet courageous, yielding yet faithful. She was able to avert the intent of evil individuals determined to destroy her people. Indeed, she saved God's covenant people. See, that's interesting. We're calling them God's covenant people here again, from an intended extinction. The story of Esther is sacred to the Jews. That's really interesting. Once again, right? This story is still sacred to the Jews, even though this was Benjamin saving them. So I wish we could get back to more this understanding that we're all one big family, and sacred to the Jews and compelling to all because of her dauntless defense of her convictions and her people. Her name in the Persian tongue means a star. The many meanings of this symbol are most fitting. Okay, now here's my commentary here. Now, this might seem like a weird point to make, and since Ammon's not here, he can't save me right after, so that's a shame. But it's just what came to my mind when studying this, and so I'm rolling with it. So this is the insight that came to me personally, right? And that's what I hope that, and Ammon hopes, and Topher hopes, we all hope you get from this, is that we're just giving you things that hit us this week while studying this, and we hope you get things while studying too. We're not trying to teach you a verse by verse. We're just trying to show you how inspiration comes to us. So I'm not personally a fan of how traditions and holidays have been morphed into Babylonian materialistic hollow excuses for more days of consumptions. I don't like how that's become every single tradition and every single holiday. So we've tried to take the best out of what we know of traditions and holidays and so forth, and make our own that we think are more fulfilling and less just consumerism. And one of our traditions that we've thought a lot about is naming our children names that actually have meaning, not just names that sound good or that we like the sound of. When you ask some people, and I just realized here that Topher has a child on the way, but I didn't even think of this. But most of the time when you ask people like, okay, why are you naming your kid this? It's like, oh, I like the sound of it. I just like the name, right? Instead of that, we really wanted to be like a real reason for giving you this name, and then use the meaning of the name to come up with Christmas ornaments to give them every year at Christmas. And by the way, this is something that also comes up a lot in the scriptures too, right? So we in the Book of Mormon, right? We read about Lehi taking his family into the wilderness, and then he has a couple more kids, and what does he do? He names the kids things of names that mean something. They have meaning. He talks to his sons Laban and Lemuel and names the valleys and things after his kids, and says, I would that you be like these things, right? So we see this a lot in the scriptures and with the covenant people. So for example, in our family, Kaylin, that's the name of one of my daughters, Kalyn, is a combination of Katie and a combination of Lynn, which are two of my sisters. And so that they were my best friends growing up, and were a big deal in my life. And so there was meaning behind the name, but also the name Kaylin actually means keeper of the keys. So we give her key ornaments every Christmas. I've felt reading the scriptures more and more over my life that the people of God tend to do this, as I just described with Lehi. They name their children things, and they name things after their children that they hope their children will someday become and be like. Earlier this year, studying the Old Testament, we talked about Ruth, and who happens to be one of my favorite heroines in the Church of Jesus Christ. And right, the Church of Jesus Christ is what it's always been from Adam to today. So she's one of my favorites. There are a lot of names in the church that are very common for girls, and I find it sad how many popular LDS girl names are named after tragedies and not heroines. Ruth was one such, and there are not very many that Ashley and I have ever met before, meaning there aren't very many Ruths that we've met in the church. And she's a fantastic heroine. As crazy as it sounds, we've actually met a wonderful Ruth in this group, Saints are Zion or Bust. This group of saints in Zion or Bust named Ruth, and she's actually from the UK. And we've absolutely loved that because we just don't know any. So let's jump to Esther. What a heroine. Here's another one that is just an absolute just stud. And once again, the only people that I know named Esther, they're not submissive, they're not faithful, etc., kind of people. They're brutes. We need to take this name back, or we need to take back this name. We need more Esther daughters. And once more, with a name meaning star, what an easy Christmas ornament that would make. So, what was my first insight I learned this week? If I have another daughter, I think I like the name Esther. It's a great meaning, great heroine, and I don't think you can get much easier than giving a star ornament at Christmas. So. And hopefully, if I raise my daughter right, if she was named Esther, she will actually be a woman like this Esther. So, and that was my thought.
No, that's a good thought. I like that. Just firstly on Esther and her beauty. She must have been a real beauty. The way it described her in the scriptures there. And but she also had those inward, awesome other qualities, right? Like, I think now personally, I know what that feels like. being a real beauty, but also having the awesome qualities. I'm very humble as well.
Nice.
No, but it's I think there's something to that. Especially if you look at the world today, right? And it's very hard to talk about attractiveness of people without offending people, but the most attractive, let's say the most attractive women, right, very rarely are walking around with amazing morals. And again, I don't want to offend anyone here. I'm talking in very general terms, but let's just say the most attractive women are often not worried so much about, because what can they get with their attractiveness? They can get things often easier given to them. There's a million ways to make money through your attractiveness these days, right? So anyway, what the point I'm getting at is that Esther, with her beauty, this beauty that was apparently far beyond, so much so that when she went into the king, she could have taken anything she wanted with her. You know, they would say, what do you want? You can dress up however you want. You can wear whatever you want. You can take things in with you to impress the king. And she's like, no, I don't care. I'll go in with whatever the default. Just make me default. And she goes in and she still catches his eye to the point where he can't stop looking at her the whole time. And so she was very, very beautiful. And yet, look at the inward character that she had. Amazing, right? Like, look what she was able to do. And she literally saved all her people from a genocide because of her, you know, her and Mordecai together, their qualities, amazing, right? So that's the first thing. Really good. Now, the other thing about the naming, I like this because, you know, it's so funny, is I've thought about all these things that we've talked about so far today and yesterday, and not knowing what you were going to talk about. So I was thinking about this. Now, we know people who have either felt through the spirit or known what name they should call their kids, right? Now, like, that hasn't happened to me, but I know now multiple people who have known what they need to call their kids. And sometimes they didn't want to call their kids that name, but it was pressed upon them again. And they said, okay, I'll name my kid that. And then I was thinking about this. It was either this morning in the shower, because that's where I get a lot of thinking done. You know, when you're in the shower, for some reason, that's where all the thoughts start running. And I was thinking, do names matter? I actually had this thought. And then I thought, they really do matter. I think maybe sometimes they don't. I don't know, but they definitely do sometimes. And then the one example that I thought of, and there's probably many, right? But the one example I thought of is Joseph Smith, because we know that Joseph Smith was prophesied to be named Joseph after his father Joseph, after Joseph in Egypt. And so do names always matter? I don't know. I can't say for sure they always do. I think it's a really good idea and a beautiful idea to name someone after something that they should aspire to, or like exactly like what Micah said, these beautiful examples. It's a really good idea to name your own children after these beautiful examples. But we do know definitely that in some cases, at least, the names matter. The names of your children will matter, because there will be times when they will be called to do something, and look at that name had to be such. Yeah, so it's a very interesting thought. But anyway, I do really like the idea of naming your children after these heroines and what have you. And I mean, you named your son as well that way as well, I assume, you know, or did you know
Benjamin?
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny we're talking about Benjamin too, right? So like, is that why you named him Benjamin? I don't know.
Yeah. And
so it's
Benjamin
a good way to go.
Benjamin means mirror image. And so it's really interesting because so we named him Benjamin Micah. And so Ashley wanted him to be like me, but which was kind of scary. But so I guess I need to be better. But yes, and then it
would be awesome if your middle name's Benjamin. Is your middle name Benjamin?
No, it's named after my father, awesome. Thomas.
Okay, there you go. But it would be awesome if that was the case.
Yeah, we're mirror images of each other. But his Christmas ornaments are all mirrors, are all things that are glass and mirrors. So
I like that. That's some good traditions to have. Yeah, and it keeps them thinking about, you know, and you're going to remind them every time. So it'll keep them thinking about, I was named after this person who did this awesome stuff. It's a good idea.
if you do that, right? If you just, like a name has no
Yeah.
meaning unless you give it to them and say, this is why you're named this. But yeah, when you were talking about, the beautiful women that have the worst morals, I just did the 10 virgins.
We're going to get so many downvotes on this.
Yeah, that's fine. But I was thinking about the 10 virgins, and a big part of that was the men aspect. So I'm taking this to men. So maybe now we're going to get upvotes, but maybe they've already left. They're already left in a fit before I can get to the men. But the thing with the men was the concept was temporal preparedness or temporal salvation and so forth. And Talmage, I believe it was, in the church's student manual, was answering who is a wise steward. And he goes over and says that it's interesting that the men of God tend to just neglect the temporal. They tend to just not care about it and neglect the temporal, whereas the wicked men seem to amass plenty. And Jesus was trying to teach something in that parable, that you're supposed to be more like these wicked men, not in their wickedness and hoarding, but in their zeal and foresight and taking care of the temporal. And I just think that that's really interesting, because we do that. Like as righteous men, we tend to, I'm talking about myself specifically. It's like, well, if I had it between weeding the garden and more scripture study, it's like, well, scripture study is more valuable. And it's like, well, you can't neglect those things, right? So you can't. And what ends up happening is that if you put all your eggs in the spiritual basket, you lose all of your temporal salvation basket. And I find that, if we're going to really upset people, this seems to be the case with men in the world, right? So you're talking about men that what? They really nail their temporal, preparedness. They make a ton of money, and they get, the cars and the big fancy things. And then what ends up happening? Women become attracted to those men because of those things. And they end up leaving the church for these kind of men. And what ends up happening with women in the church, I feel like it's the same way. I feel like, that there are these women who are very physically attractive, but typically they have no spiritual, qualities, and they draw men out of the church. And what's the reason? I think that we have women who have spiritual qualities, who then say, well, if this temporal stuff isn't important, if that makes sense. So just like men, they're like, oh, I'm going to read the scriptures, I don't need to weed the garden. And women, it's very similar. I'm a spiritual person, and therefore these temporal things don't matter. And then men do the same thing, stupid things, and they go pursue these, like we just went over Samson, where it's like, well, no, I'm not going to marry these righteous women because these women over here are far more attractive. And then he ends up going and making the worst mistake of his life, and going off and trying to pursue that woman who ends up being his downfall. And so, yeah, I think there is a bit of that we need to be worried about as men. We don't neglect the temporal salvation just because we're spiritual. And with women, we don't neglect the physical, the physical aspects of our body. We don't neglect them for spiritual as well. Like, yes, we need to be spiritual. Yes, we need to be good. And I understand that, but neglecting the other half seems to be something that the people of God have suffered with. So
that's a really good thought. And you definitely worded that way more eloquently than I could have. But what's interesting is that is my third insight as well.
Oh,
so it's not like, I mean, no, it's good. Like, so my third insight kind of has this tie in as well. So yeah, awesome. But yeah, it's a really fascinating point. It's hard to talk about these things without sort of, being like, people want to be offended at a lot of things, but we're not trying to be offensive. But it is, and when you talk in generalities, these things do occur. So anyway, really good point. I agree. All right. Well, let's steam on. Ammon has confirmed he will not be joining us, so that's okay. Hope he gets better. Okay. So my insight number 2, brothers, is, I've titled it, "What are the odds?"
What are the odds?
So what are the odds? And that's what you were talking about, the odds at the start. I can't remember what you said now, but I was saying this is like my insight number 2. So here we go. So I personally have this really bad habit when either something doesn't go right for me, or if I take Pepsi's one of them.
What are the odds?
Take
That's what what are the odds is about.
Yeah, right. That's it. That's what it was. But so okay, so including Pepsi, but I have a really bad habit when either something doesn't go right for me, or if I take a chance on something, whether it's important or not, that I would have had a good chance of going my way, but it doesn't. I always exclaim, "What are the odds?" Like that's I'm always like, "What are the odds?" Like I'm always like, offended, like upset that the universe, like it's the universe, or I never blame God, but it's always like, what are the odds of that not working out for me? You know what I mean? Like, and I like to blame anything but myself. So I'm always like, what are the odds of that? So that's a bad habit I have. And this is my way as a serial complainer to exclaim my absolute disbelief that something I really had zero control over did not go my way. All right. Something in which I rightly don't have the authority to complain about, really, because I have no control over the odds of things, right? And maybe you're like me, or maybe you're better and smarter than me, but either way, you might understand what I'm talking about. And put it this way, it's truly a blessing that we are counseled not to gamble, because I love playing the odds, but they rarely love me. I'm not saying that I don't really care about gambling, but who knows, if I was inclined to be a gambler, who knows, maybe I would get caught up in stuff like that. So I'm grateful that we don't do that. Anyway, so onto my point here. So Haman, he gets permission from the king to exterminate all the Jews. So leading off from my first point, he gets permission from the king to exterminate all the Jews because Mordecai offended him. And Haman rolled with the odds, right? He rolled with the odds. He cast lots to determine the day of the extermination, and the date fell almost a year away, right? So that's crazy, right? It's a long way. So there's a section in the church manual. It's 31-9 for Esther chapter 3 verses 7 to 15. It's titled, "Why was the decree prematurely published?" I should quickly explain what happened. You should all have read the story, hopefully, but he rolled these odds. He set the date for the extermination of the Jews. It happened to be almost a year away, but he straight away went to the scribes and had them write down this extermination order as a decree from the king, and he sent it straight out into the whole 127 countries that the king ruled over. So a lot of people. And I think it might explain in here a bit about the time it would have taken to do that. But anyway, so I'll read this. So that's what happened. But why was the decree prematurely published? Why did he put it out so far ahead of the date? So it says, Esther was the queen for 3 years before Haman put his plot to work. This he did by first casting pur, or lots. And that goes along with Purim, which is the feast. Anyway, we might talk about that later, I'm not sure. But Purim is the feast that they hold every year to this day. So he first cast pur, or lots, to determine the day for carrying out this decree. First for the day of the month, and then for the month of the year. Here the question is forced upon us why the decree should have been so prematurely published. The scribes were summoned to prepare it on the 13th day of the first month. For this purpose, even though many copies had to be made in different languages, no very long time would be required in a well-appointed government office. As soon as the scribes had finished their work, the decree was sent out by the posts into all the quarters of the realm, and would arrive even in the most distant provinces in 3 weeks at furthest. So really, he's sent this out. It was something that takes 3 weeks. He sent it out a year early, or like 11 months early, or 10 months. And it says that here. So this would place almost 11, and in the remotest parts, about 10 months between the publication and execution of the decree. What then was the motive for such an interval? Certainly, so long a time could not be required for preparing to carry it out. Nor is this hinted at in the text, nor could it be intended that the Jews should suffer a long period of anxiety. On the contrary, the motive seems to have been to cause many Jews to leave their property and to escape to other lands for the sake of preserving their lives. Thus, Haman would attain his object, would be relieved of the presence of the Jews and be able to enrich himself by the appropriation of their possessions. On the other hand, the providence of God overruling the event, and this is the important thing to note, on the other hand, the providence of God overruling the event in the interest of the Jews is unmistakably evident both in Haman's haste to satisfy his desire for vengeance and in the falling of the lot upon so distant a day. It was only because there was so long an interval between the publication of the decree and the day appointed by Lot for its execution that it was possible for the Jews to take means for averting the destruction with which they were threatened, as the further development of the history will show. We know what happened. Mordecai and Esther, they were able to get in, and absolutely awesome story, miraculous story. We're able to turn those events. Anyway, so let's end quote from the manual there. This is my words now. So we know by some amazing turn of events that Haman not only did not succeed with his plot, but it was reversed entirely in the opposite direction. If it was executed that same day that he decided upon this plot and the day it was decreed, the Jews would have been killed. It would have been genocide, it would have been done. There was no reason to wait except that he had cast these lots. Now Haman, this is my guess, is that Haman was likely a superstitious person. As a Persian, often, with these pagan religions and bits and pieces, they often adhere to the superstitious stuff. And that's probably why he adhered to these dates selected by lots cast, even though it was so far away. So it was, but also we know God had a hand in this. So to put it simply, he rolled with the odds and he lost. But we know it wasn't just the odds or just bad luck. It was the Lord that guided the outcome. It was, as it says in this quote that I just read, it was the providence of God overruling the event in the interest of the Jews. So I've got a story. This came to my mind as I was reading this, and it's a pretty good one. It's not that long. It's a little long, but I have written it down here. I may vary it as I read it, depending on my memory. So about 13 years ago, me and my wife were renting, and we decided that we wanted to get a house of our own. We decided that building the house would be the best option for our circumstances. So we could have built or bought, I suppose, but we decided that building works out usually a little cheaper. We decided we'd build a house. We put a lot of effort into this goal, a lot of time, a lot of research into areas, builders, banks, and also a lot of contemplation, prayer, and faith in the Lord. Like he knew what we wanted, we knew what we wanted, and we were worthy and faithful and knew that he would help us achieve our goal. And he kept guiding us and helping us on the way. So we could feel that he was helping us and guiding us in this direction anyway. It was a righteous desire, and he knew that we wanted to have a family, and so he was helping us to achieve that. So we found the perfect land release. It was a newly created estate in the middle of an old suburb that they had created. They created this new estate by demolishing a whole bunch of old homes that I guess the government owned. They demolished them, as well as some bushland, and they created this whole new estate in the middle of this old suburb. And the location was perfect. It was great. It was very central to everything we wanted to be near. It was close to work, close to the city. The blocks were big. It had everything we cared about. It was a really great suburb. Everything pointed us to this location, and it felt right. We didn't have a lot of money at the time. I was recently off my mission, and we barely even had a deposit. We barely had anything, but we did manage to get the finance ready just in the nick of time to put our names down for one of these blocks of land. It turns out that the land in this area was hugely popular, and probably for the same reasons we found it desirable. And the demand for the blocks of land far surpassed the quantity of land available. Still, we persisted with this because the Lord we felt pushing us this way, and we felt good about it, and this is what we wanted to do. We went and looked at all the blocks of land. So we drove around the estate and we checked, and we're like, where would we want to actually live? If we could choose any block we wanted, where would we want to live? And we drove around the whole thing, and we picked our favorite one. And we were like, because of this and this, and we'd want to get, and we picked our favorite block. And due to the popularity of these blocks of land, they had to sell them by ballot, which I'd never dealt with before in terms of something like this. I didn't even know they did this. I just thought you could buy a block of land and that was it. So I'm not sure how often they do this thing, but these blocks of land were sold by holding a big ballot. And here we are playing the odds, my friends. Here we are playing the odds again. And they very rarely work in my favor. But this means that everyone who wants a block, they sign up and they basically are drawing lots, right? And if you're lucky, you get to choose a block of land from the remaining blocks available. So the earlier the first person gets to choose any block they want, and then so forth. And so you might not get a block at all, let alone the block that you want. So we were faithful and hopeful, but we were also, it was a bit worrying that we might not even get anything. So the day of the ballot came. We were hopeful and faithful, and we felt that everything had pointed us to this moment. We put our names in the ballot. So we arrived at this place. There was heaps of people. There was hundreds of people there. We put our names down on the thing, and we were assigned a random number. And so we got a ball with the number 37 written on it. And this is a long time ago, but I remember everything about this because it was cool. So we got the number 37 on it, and we put this 37 into the little bingo spinny bally, whatever you call that ball spinner gadget. And then we went and sat and waited. So just so you understand, the odds were extremely stacked against us. There were about 40 blocks, and there were literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people there signed up for this ballot. So a lot of people were going to go home this day without a block of land. So we went and stood against, amongst this huge group of people, and almost holding our breaths, and waiting for this, for them to start drawing the numbers. I remember being very anxious. They spun the spinny bally thingy, and they picked out the first ball, and they called out 37. and I remember it almost makes me tear. It is making me tear up to this day. We stood there for a second in pure shock. I could not believe they had just called our number first out of the whole hundreds and hundreds of people, and they called our number first. And I remember sitting there, and I almost was basically started crying my eyes out in amazement and thanksgiving right then and there in front of everybody. And I remember feeling like some sort of like, kind of like a simple, like, you've done the right thing, here's you're on the right track. Here's a blessing, like you've done well. I felt like some consolation, some satisfaction. I felt like this little way that Heavenly Father was saying, here you go. You've done what I've asked, and you deserve this. Anyway, so I had tears in my eyes, and we were in shock, and we walked up to the front, and the crowd cheered, huge cheer for us as we went up to the front, and we proceeded to sign on some paperwork, and we got to choose any block we wanted from the whole estate, and we already knew exactly which one we wanted. And I guess because we were first, we actually went in the newspaper because of this, because it was, some sort of big event, I suppose. So my point, the odds were against us. The odds were that we should have walked away that day without a block of land. Now, who really controls the odds? Are there any coincidences with the Lord, really? The Lord can make the most unlikely odds become a certainty, and he will do it for the right reasons and the right people at the right time. If we take a step back and look at our lives, we will see that we are surrounded by odds all day, every day. And so my last thing is here. Don't play the odds. You can't beat the odds. Don't trust in the odds. Trust in the Lord. The Lord controls the odds, and he will work it to your benefit, right? Just like this story with Esther and Mordecai. If you do the right thing, the Lord controls the odds.
What's interesting is that I wrote two things for this, and you answered or said exactly what I had written down as we were going. So the first thing, you were talking about the odds and not being an odds guy, and I wrote down, this sounds so much like me, it's scary. And then the very next line you said was, this might not sound like you, or it might sound like you. And it was like, well, that's weird. I just wrote down, that sounds so much like me, it's scary. And then right after that, I wrote, when you were talking about him casting lots, how it was so weird that it happened so late. And I thought, well, it's interesting that here's a man going to an improper source, casting lots, but the casting lots did sort of reveal the will of the Lord, because the Lord wasn't going to make sure that that lot fell in the wrong way, because he had to make sure that there was enough time. So it's interesting that this, like, he thinks he's going to some other god or chaos to get an answer, and happens to actually get an answer from the Lord unknowingly, because the Lord made it land that way. And then you said, don't play the odds, you can't beat the odds, don't trust in the odds, trust in the Lord, because he's the one who makes the odds. That's exactly what my other point was. But so it was interesting. So you nailed, you went through both of them. The first one, it was funny because just yesterday, what I say, I don't say what are the odds anymore, because apparently they're really good. I don't say that one a lot, but I find myself when I'm getting really frustrated, I'll say something like, man, it seems like accidentally something should fall right. Like by now,
you've had so many, yeah.
Like it seems like, like when you're talking about my son, or it's like, it seems like accidentally by now this should have just fallen the right way by now, but for some reason, so it's like intentionally bad. Like, how is this happening? So this is not possible. Like, you can't be this bad. Like, accidentally, some of them have to fall right. But yeah, that was just yesterday I said that. So I think you said, what did you say, chronic whiner or complainer? And I thought, maybe that's me. Yeah, it's me. Chronic whiner.
That's me. It's bad. My wife hates it because whenever anything happens I don't like, it's like I can't, and maybe it is me that I got to blame myself. I don't blame myself for anything ever, and my wife, she finds that really, really frustrating. So she's like, just take the blame yourself. I'm like, well, it wasn't me, but it probably was me, but like whatever it is, it could be anything. But I never take the blame myself. She just texted me, he never blames himself.
She did.
She can hear me. And she's like, yeah, you never blame yourself. Yeah, I know. But it's funny. But the last thing you said there about, it's like sometimes you have so many things, maybe just go wrong one after the other, or to the point where you're like, even if we're playing the odds are that
I should win this one.
Good. Yeah, this any minute now, this is gonna flip my direction, And it makes me think of my dad.
Any minute now.
Any minute now. But it makes me think of my dad, because my dad, he's there's no time to go into his story, but he had a lot of string of bad luck for many years, and he always calls it, he's on the bones of his butt. As in, like, he's just, nothing's going right. He's got nothing. And to the point where, like, it's the same sort of thing, like where it's gone wrong for him. And he's a very faithful man. He honestly, like, I mean, he's definitely got his flaws, but he's a very faithful guy. He, does everything right. He studies and, he goes to church and blah, blah, blah. But he's had a run of really bad health and a run of really bad business things. And so even him, he says this sort of thing too, is that, like, how can I be dragged? I'm just dragged through the mud nonstop. Like, when do I get a chance to breathe, or when do things start going right? And it's to the point where, to be honest, it's almost like it is obvious that it's from the Lord. Like, not that the Lord's punishing him, but that I always tell him, I'm like, you're obviously, Joseph Smith, he talks about getting knocked against other things until he becomes a smooth shaft that he can be, launched in, from the Lord's quiver, right? And I'm like, my dad, he's he's a good guy, but he's got a lot of rough edges. And I'm like, Dad, clearly you have a lot of edges that need grinding off on the bones of your butt there on the floor, and to the point where it probably is Heavenly Father trying to knock some of these edges off, intentionally, because there's a work for us to do soon enough. And he needs you to be at a certain point, So it's funny that there are no odds, really. I mean, some stuff Heavenly Father probably doesn't care about, and he'll let the odds roll whatever way they do. But there's multiple quotes in this in the readings this week. There was one I had, and it was Elder Razband. He says that the Lord is in the little detail. The Lord is in the little detail. There are no coincidences, He's aware of everything. He's aware of all the odds, and he controls the odds. They're not odds. They're not coincidences. Again, maybe some he doesn't care about, and they're a coincidence because he doesn't care, and they're not important in any way, or shape, or form. But things that matter, the Lord is aware of and involved with. And so how do we make those odds roll in our favor? I mean, we're obedient, right? We do whatever he wants us to do. If we're doing what he wants us to do, the odds will roll in our favor. That's literally how it goes. Of course, there's caveats to that, but we could talk about that forever.
Yeah. There's actually, it's funny or crazy because Ashley and I had almost an identical story in that regard. So when Ashley and I were getting married, Ashley was going to live with her parents. Things fell through. Obviously, people are familiar with this. She was disowned by her family for a bit for joining the church, and Ashley didn't feel comfortable being alone. I mean, Ashley was from a pretty affluent family. She hadn't even done laundry when I married her, hadn't even done it one time. And so, I mean, she did not feel comfortable going off on her own. So I said, okay, well, I'll move up. I'll quit school. I'll go to Canada. And we had no place. And we were looking around town for the cheapest rentals we could find. I mean, we didn't care. Scary neighborhoods, drug lords upstairs, anything, give us anything. And the cheapest places we could find were $750 a month, which for us was just unfeasible. We couldn't afford that as both being students. And so anyway, this cat, I think, just chewed through my earphone. So hopefully I can still hear you. But okay, good. So we didn't know what to do. So what we did is we found out that there was, and we also, how do we do with transportation and all this? Well, Ashley's pharmacy school was being moved off campus to the medical campus, and there was apartments there for the students that you could rent for married couples and so forth. That was $400 a month, and that was just really, really cheap. And so we said, well, let's sign up and see if we can get one of these apartments. And we signed up, and they'd said, just so you know, it probably won't be until your last year in university, year 4, until you get a place here, even come up, because there's 300 people on the list. And so you're probably not going to be, just so you know. So if you're year 1, expect to get this year 3 or 4. And it's oh, okay. So then we basically forgot about it. And I told Ash, who was starting to get really worried, and we held a fast, and we said, okay, Lord, take care of us. We need help. And Ash was actually down, because long distance relationship. She was in Winnipeg. So she was actually down visiting me. And we get a call, and apparently, so the apartments were going to be used for obviously dental, medical school, as well as pharmacy. But since the pharmacy building was just moving over there, they had nobody represented from pharmacy in those places. And they said, well, because you are a pharmacy student, we want you in right away. So if you want it, it's yours. And so
that's awesome.
We jumped up 300 spots on the list just because Ashley was in pharmacy and not a doctor. And we got that. And not only that, they wouldn't allow animals, but Ashley and I didn't want to not leave our animals behind. Or they didn't like animals. So we also successfully kept our place clean and hid animals in that apartment. And all the years of
Wow.
Ashley's school. So yeah,
that's awesome.
jumped up like 300
The Lord's in the
slots.
details.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I love it.
So
anyway, good.
All right, so we can do number 2. Hopefully people can hear me. I might have to just take out my earbud and start muting myself so you don't get an echo in this mic.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. It's me. I can't hear. So now I'm down to one earbud. This kitten's insane, dude. Just chewed through while I'm sitting here. Look down and she's chewed off half of my earbud. So
no.
So okay. So these things are cheap. These are old things. Okay, so insight number 2. And if you thought that I was going to inflame people before, or were inflaming people before, Topher, wait till I get through this one. Okay, so yeah, hair on fire emoji, start now. Okay, so in the student manual for under 31-3 Esther 119 irrevocable edicts, we read, Queen Vashti's refusal to obey a direct summons of the king may engender the sympathy of modern readers. But in an age when women were expected to be subservient and when an emperor had absolute power over life and death, her stubbornness is surprising. But the reaction of the assembly is not too surprising. The men present at the banquet immediately sensed that such independence of spirit in Vashti, who was unquestionably envied by the other women of the empire, would inspire a similar independence of spirit in their wives. If Vashti's rebelliousness, as viewed by these men, were to go unpunished, they knew it would inspire similar responses in their wives. Therefore, they punished Ahasuerus. Oh, they have pushed him, for action. So they pushed the king for action, and particularly asked for a decree that could not be altered. Okay, so that's what the student manual says. End quote from there. So reading this story, reading this from the student manual, the thought came to me that many modern women would rather be named Vashti than Esther. I think they really would. Looking at this story, who was the hero and who was the not hero? I think they would look at Vashti and they would say that's the hero, not Esther. She's the one who was actually, stood up and was aggressive and was independent and died for what she believed, right? And Esther was submissive and kind and so forth. And I would say this, I even know some Esthers that act more like Vashti's. And it made me think of this quote from Elder M. Russell Ballard in his talk that he gave entitled Women of Righteousness. And I'm just taking a section of that talk. And he said, there is nothing a woman can do that has more far-reaching eternal impact than to rear her children to walk in righteousness. Some women do not have the privilege of marrying or rearing children in this life, yet if they are worthy, these blessings will come later. Women who do have the privilege of rearing children will, of course, be held accountable for that priceless eternal stewardship. There is simply not a more significant contribution women can make to society, to the church, or to the eternal destiny of our Father's children than what they will do as mothers. For that reason, I'm concerned about what I see happening with some of our young women. Satan would have you dress, talk, and behave in unnatural and destructive ways. I would say Satan's trying to make you act like Vashtis. The adversary is having a heyday, distorting attitudes about gender and roles and about families and individual worth. He is the author of mass confusion about the value, the role, the contribution, and the unique nature of women. Today's popular culture, which is preached by every form of media, from the silver screen to the internet, celebrates the sexy, saucy, socially aggressive women, the Vashtis. These distortions are seeping into the thinking of some of our women. Remember, Satan wants us to be miserable like unto himself. His plan is to get women so preoccupied with the world's glitzy lie about women that they completely miss what they have come here to do and to become. Remember and never lose your precious identity. Your influence on families and with children and with youth and with men is singular. We don't need women who want to be like men, sound like men, dress like men, drive like some men drive, or act like some men. We do need women who rejoice in their womanhood and have a spiritual confirmation of their identity, their value, and their eternal destiny. End quote from Elder M. Russell Ballard. And this might light some people's hair on fire. So if I haven't lit your hair on fire already, it's definitely going to happen now. But because we have more women like Vashti who want to spend all day making look at me clips on Facebook, who spend more time putting on makeup than homeschooling their kids, and because we have not enough women like Esther, women who are spiritual, submissive, long-suffering, etc., we are seeing and will continue to see the fulfillment to Isaiah chapter 3. And the people shall be oppressed, everyone by another, and everyone by his neighbor. The child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient, and the base against the honorable. The show of their countenance does witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom, they hide it not. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves. As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err and destroy the ways of thy paths. Moreover, the Lord said, because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes, walking and mincing as they go, and making a tinkling with their feet. Therefore, the Lord will smite with a scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will discover their secret parts. In that day, the Lord will take away the bravery of their tinkling ornaments about their feet and their coals. And it's interesting here is, once again, the bravery of their tinkling ornaments. Thinking back to Esther and what Topher said here earlier, what did Esther choose to do? She didn't trust in any of this. She didn't take the tinkling ornaments. She didn't do that. So they're saying in this day the Lord will take away the bravery that you get from this vanity, right? Caused from these things. The chains and the bracelets and the mufflers, the bonnets and the ornaments of the legs and the headbands and the tablets and the earrings and the rings and the nose jewels, the changeable suits of apparel and the mantlets and the wimples and the crisping pins, the glasses and the fine linen and the hoods and the veils. And it shall come to pass that instead of sweet smell, there shall be stink, and instead of girdle, a rent, and instead of well-set hair, baldness, and instead of a stomacher, a girding of sackcloth, and burning instead of beauty. Thy men shall fall by the sword, and thy mighty in the war, and her gates shall lament and mourn, and she being desolate, shall sit upon the ground. And that was my second point.
My hair is on fire. Help. Oh man, no. So exactly what you said, that is starting to get, again, as we've already talked about, dangerously close to how it is today. I like, do you know when did M. Russell Ballard say that quote? Do you know when that was? Women of Righteousness. We could probably look it up, but because, I mean, far out. Talk about like hitting the nail on the head with how it's become today. A few things that I found interesting about that is that I think it was in the quote from the manual there. The men present at the banquet immediately sensed that such independence of spirit in Vashti, who was envied by other women and would inspire similar independence of the spirit in their wives. So again, these people are worried that, you know, one like example, however you want to take that example, is going to cause, it was 2002, was it? So, okay, so 20 years ago, but it was probably bloody dead on then, and it's even more dead on now. But what was I saying? So yeah, but they're worried about the effect that this one person will have on the other women, right? Just like it was with back in my point before, how they were worried about Mordecai and his example and how it will affect other people as well. Anyway, but what I love about M. Russell Ballard's quote there, which is honestly so, it's almost like he's a seer or a prophet or a seer or something.
But being 20 years ago, can't we see the effect? So he's warning that women are looking at these sources right now, and they're making their decisions about what a woman is based off of those. 20 years later, was he wrong?
He was dead on.
Yeah.
I like the bit about the heyday, having a heyday distorting attitudes about gender and roles and about families and individual worth. And it's so accurate. Like I don't even want to point out anyone specific, but like you can see it in like the young women in your ward. You know what I mean? You can see, and not even in our ward, but just in general, the general, you know, it's funny, like I'm 38 this year, and I still I don't feel my age. I don't feel old, but like, you know, you always, I feel young. I still feel like I'm a 22-year-old or something. Like I still feel like I'm cool and hip, but really I'm probably like now getting to the point where like the youth would look at me as a, you know, an old uncool, yeah, old, you know, like this guy has no clue, no class, no coolness about him at all. And I'm looking at them going, I can see in this reverse, I can see that this is now being lost on them. The gender roles, not cool, right? Not cool to have a gender role for women. You know, how dare you put that on a woman? Yeah. Also, what is a woman? You know, because anyone can be whatever they want. You know, it's oh man, it's so accurate. And then I think lastly, he was saying, remember and never lose your precious identity, because it's eternal. You know, our identities are eternal. And I mean, how smart is Satan for trying to muddy that up, you know, to the point where people are confused about who they are, what they are, and what gender they are. You know what I mean? Like he's done a fantastic job at doing what he's meant to do to confuse everyone, but, you know, our youth, you know, male and female really, but like what a state we're in. So he nailed it, man. He nailed it on the head.
And he said, don't underestimate the power you have with men. Don't underestimate your power. And this story is the story of Esther and Vashti is a perfect story to show what Hollywood is portraying versus what's real. And Hollywood portrays Vashti as the hero. She stood her ground. She was sexy and saucy, and she died for what she believed in, right? She died holding her ground. Okay. But Esther, and not only that, the men in the room, they didn't think a second thought about it, man. They said, yeah, no, kill her. Yeah, no, kill her, and don't let our women hear about her. I mean, that's how they treated her. Esther, on the other hand, who was submissive and sweet and kind, she broke the king like this, because that has power over a man. You know, if you're sweet and you're kind and you're gentle, those are things that men value, right? And it's funny because I'm thinking about the movie Brave, where the Disney animated movie Brave. And if you're going to compete, women, if you're going to compete with strength and valor, and you know what, you're going to lose to other men. You're going to lose, because men are having to compete with other men all day long with those things. And guess what? They grow beards. They have testosterone. They're much more aggressive, nasty creatures, right? What happened in the movie Brave? All the men were wrestling and fighting. I don't know if you saw the movie. They're all wrestling and fighting in the throne room. And the mother walked into the room and was calm and was peaceful and just made everyone else ashamed. And everyone else just stopped fighting. All the men went into their places and they were ashamed and they stopped just because of a presence of a woman. Because that is something that is so out of what you would call the natural man sphere that men respect it. They can't deny the power of that a woman possesses when she is like that. When she's elegant and submissive and kind, you will be able to break even the strongest men, even the craziest kings over time with that power. 100%. But if you try to come at it like,
No, go on.
But if you try to come at it like Vashti, you will not have men won't care. And I mean, obviously they're not going to try to kill you in today's society, but they're going to want no part with you. And so.
I mean, so the example and the power of a woman who understands her role, her identity, her eternal identity, and her her role, her nature, her what her value, what that can do, what that can command, like her understanding that, and that's what's being lost. Like the youth are growing and they don't understand their role, their identity. They also feel now by going to school probably that they aren't allowed to have this identity and this role and this, any sort of like gender roles and traditional anything has been thrown out the window. That's not right anymore to have that. If you think like that, you are the problem. That's old thinking,
and weak.
Weak, yeah, backwards. When in reality, that thought is backwards. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. If a woman comes, and this is, and if men are being honest with you, women, if a woman comes at me and is aggressive and mean and is, all those things, saucy or whatever, I'm going to treat her exactly like I treat a man, which I'm telling you. I was
about to say that. Yep.
Which I'm telling you is not very special. It's not very special. And you know what? If you want to compete like that, it's not going to fare very well for you. But man, if you come at me and you come at me submissive and you come at me with those things, I will do everything I can. And that's not a white knight complex. That's just this is a good human being that I want to help. And you will get so much more leverage out of your boys and your men. With that, you will get so much more mileage out of it. Even to the point
where we will protect and defend and stand 100%. For, and like you name it, because that is the innate built-in gender role for us. You know what I mean? Like that's correct. That's what we do. Yeah.
Chivalry is not dead, right? It's not dead. It's a chivalry is in our nature to protect women like Esther. It's just the way it is. And so you become that kind of woman, you're going to have men bend over backwards for you. There's a real power in it. There really is.
Awesome. All right. Shall I do my third insight?
That's right. Do it. Bring people back.
Now this,
Bring people back.
Now this is definitely Topher's 2 a.m. Insight. This one, so we'll see what happens here. I don't even remember writing it, so we'll see. Okay, so I start off with something from the church manual under the points to ponder section. It's 31-19, and it's titled Mordecai in the world, but not of it. It says Mordecai's situation is parallel in some ways to that in which modern followers of Jesus find themselves. For Mordecai, Babylon was a physical reality. He was forced to function in the midst of an alien society. Today, Babylon, or the world, is a spiritual reality. The standards of the modern world are increasingly alien to the values held by the disciples of the Savior. The challenge is to keep the values intact and yet find ways, as did Mordecai, to be of service both to society and to Christ. Mordecai could not have done what he did if he had compromised his standards. Because he had prepared himself and was willing to become involved, he eventually became the chief minister of the king. The Lord in the Doctrine and Covenants tells us to be anxiously engaged in good causes. This suggests we can't respond to all causes. We must be selective in the things we seek to do in terms of community and civic chores. But it also suggests we ought to devote a measure of our time and talent to do these things, for they do count on the scales of action as God sees it. And this, just before I continue, this is what reminded me when Micah was talking before about the temporal basket and the spiritual basket, and not neglecting, doing one and not neglecting the other. Like, they're both important. So this is where this ties in for me into my insight here. It continues on. The world is full of fads. The world is full of the marches of lemmings to the sea. The world is full of causes that lead into conceptual cul-de-sacs. And you'll see who said this quote, by the way, at the end of this, and you'll see why I love it. Our task, therefore, is to be wise in the selection of good causes, using the scriptures and the modern prophets as our guide. Anne Morrow Lindbergh, in her book, Gift from the Sea, says, "My life cannot implement in action all the demands of all the people to whom my heart responds. You will care for more things than you will be able to do things about." Wise selection of causes is one of the highest forms of the use of free agency that there is, and really one of the ways God tests our basic wisdom and our capacity to love. And Neil A. Maxwell said this, and that's why it's a great quote.
A banger.
A banger. All right, so end quote there from the manual. My words now. So my cliche phrase, which you've all heard before, I'm sure, is that my dog's whining at the door. That's not my cliche phrase.
My dog's at the door. Yeah, I've heard that a lot, actually, Tober.
That's a good one. That's a very good one.
That's not quite a
cliche phrase. My cliche phrase is, our time and our obedience are really all we have to give to the Lord. That's something I always sort of say, is that when I break things down as simple as possible, our time and our obedience is all we really have to offer the Lord, right? In terms of how we're going to sacrifice these things for him. He gives us everything. What are we going to give him? We have our obedience to his commandments and how much time we can give to the things that he requires of us. So as we learned from Elder Maxwell's quote there, not only do we need to devote a measure of our time, but it's important that we select good causes. Again, back to Micah's bit about temporal, spiritual, not neglecting the other. There are important things often in both baskets. We are in a spiritual Babylon, and it's easy to surround ourselves in causes that don't matter. I'm certainly guilty of that. Lead nowhere and don't develop our character or attributes in any way, and lead into, as he said, conceptual cul-de-sacs. I don't say this from any high and mighty standpoint, me. I say this mainly directed at myself, because this is something that I'm always trying to do myself. I'm constantly trying to purge the Babylon from my life, to ensure I give the Lord enough of my time, and to make sure that time is spent doing things that he would want me to do. And to go further off what Micah said before, sometimes just because something's not a reading the scriptures, or it's something clearly obviously spiritual, does not necessarily mean that it's a bad thing, because also the Lord has often very tedious, very menial, very boring, and yet like tasks that he requires of us, depending on what it might be, which can often lead to other things, whatever that might be, for us or for other people, to benefit them. You never know what it is, right? So there are sometimes we have to dedicate our time and things to menial tasks, which are looking after ourselves, our house, our family, whatever. Not that that's menial, but you get what I'm trying to say, hopefully. But the Lord does use these things sometimes as well. So spiritual, physical, temporal, both can be important. Elder Dallin H. Oakes, he gave a talk called Focus and Priorities in General Conference in April 2001. And he told this little story in it, and I'm just going to read it quickly. He said, 2 men formed a partnership. They built a small shed beside a busy road. They obtained a truck and drove it to a farmer's field where they purchased a truckload of melons for $1 a melon. They drove the loaded truck to their shed by the road where they sold their melons for $1 a melon. They drove back to the farmer's field and bought another truckload of melons for $1 a melon. Transporting them to the roadside, they again sold them for $1 a melon. As they drove back toward the farmer's field to get another load, one partner said to the other, "We're not making much money on this business, are we?" "No, we're not," his partner replied. "Do you think we need a bigger truck?" And then he continues on and says, "We don't need a bigger truckload of information either." And his talk is based around that we live in this age of information. Everything is available to us at the touch of a button and a thought, and like how much free time we have now compared to maybe 50, 100 years ago. And then obviously well before that, how much free time we have simply because of the things available to us now that take care of a lot of the menial stuff that we don't have to worry about now because technology takes care of it. So he says, we don't need a bigger truckload of information either. Like the two partners in the story, our biggest need is a clearer focus on how we should value and use what we already have. Available information wisely used is far more valuable than multiplied information allowed to lie fallow. And that's end quote from Elder Dallin H. Oakes. So just my last thoughts here. So by wisely using our time for things the Lord would have us do, we will also develop the strength to stand like Mordecai. This is what the first point back in the manual is getting at. My challenge is that everyone who hears this has an introspective look at where they can improve in this area. And that's I did this and I am doing this as part of writing this. So I hope everyone has an introspective look at themselves on how we can improve in this area. Ultimately, we can be a lemming off a cliff into the sea, or be someone who will not compromise our standards and be able to receive the blessings that Mordecai received. Did you ever play that game, Lemmings? Remember that old game?
Oh, video game?
It was quite good. I remember playing it on Sega. It was the Sega, you would call it Sega Genesis. We called it the Sega Mega Drive in Australia. But lemmings would drop out of this thing and you had to get the lemmings to the exit. And you could use certain lemmings to block off cliffs or whatever it was, dangers. They'd block them off and then build bridges to cross gaps, and you'd get your lemmings safely out. Anyway, great game. But that's what I thought about when he says lemmings off a cliff. I know what a real lemming is, but that's what I actually thought about.
I think you can still get that game on DOS.
They have new versions of it. Yeah, they do have new versions of it. Yeah.
Same new versions, same old story of lemmings throwing themselves into the sea. That's definitely the way that goes.
And to go off the previous point, your previous point, by the way, is what the youth are doing right now with social media and with TikTok and with all the social media influencers and the stars that all the youth are looking to all the time and trying to emulate and be like. They literally are following them in any direction they take them, and most of the time that's off a cliff. So,
and I find that form of questioning is everywhere. I like, and we laugh at it and we go, "Wow, that's such a stupid question. What were those? What do you mean, should we get a bigger truck?" I mean, come on, no one's. And we kind of laugh at it and we say, "No one's that stupid." But then I ask this, okay. When all these crazy things started happening in the public schools in America, what was the response? What was the response? Maybe the public schools need more attention. Maybe me as a parent and we need to get involved more. Maybe that's really the issue. Which is exactly the same. Think about what's the story. The story was, maybe we need a bigger truck. Not that maybe selling melons or the way we're selling melons is wrong. Just do more, put more into the same failed system. I can't, it blows my mind how much the Lord said, your school systems are corrupt to the core in the United States. They are corrupt to the core. And then said, hey, and by the way, now COVID's happening. Now you all have to homeschool. And how many parents just said, oh man, I wonder if I can get a bigger truck. That was their response to that problem. It wasn't, maybe this has failed. Maybe I shouldn't be driving back and forth and selling melons for only $1 because this is a failed system. It's just failed. And so we do this. We do this all. We laugh at this story, but I'm telling you, man, it's and once again, that's another temporal thing. It's something schooling, teaching your kids. You think, it's a temporal thing, so it's not that important. I can pass that on. I can pass that on to some school system, and I don't have to worry about it. Well, brothers and sisters, can you not see what the effect of that has been on a generation of kids? Like Topher saying, you really think they're getting all this from the church? You might have a couple crazies or whatever, but they're not being convinced of that in those cases. It is hours and hours and hours at public school where they are being programmed over and over again to believe these things. And so, it's not from a, 1 or 2 visits from a crazy teacher at church. I'm sorry. It's your schools. Your kids aren't learning this stuff other places, and so I don't know. It's one of those cases where take the time to think about these things. Take the time to think about these things. Your melons, are they really that important to you? Making money.
Are your melons important to you? I mean, it's like sending your kids to a mud farm, to a pig farm, and then every day going, how are you so dirty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you invest in bigger and bigger showers. That's what you're doing. And nobody stops to go, why are you sending them to the pig farm? Why are you sending them to the mud? Why? Well, why wouldn't you? Like, it's so shocking that somebody would even ask that question, well, don't we have to? No, we don't have to do these things. So once again, though, people of God have been typically good with the spiritual, but they've been neglecting of the temporal. This seems to be, something that wise and unwise. And not only that, I love how he uses the terms wise here. He actually uses wise. So well, anyway, or you did. Oh, no, wisely used. Available information wisely used is far more valuable than multiplied information allowed to lie. So, so once again, it's this concept of what you're really showing here. What this is really showing here is who's wise, And once again, it's being tied to a temporal thing. So anyway, good story. Liked it. Roger. Well, that was number 3. All right. Oh, okay. So my number 3. This is it, folks.
Yep.
Wrapping it up.
This is it.
Number 3. And by the way, this one shouldn't light anyone's hair on fire, but I've been terrible at predicting these things. So I'm sure the other ones are going to be totally fine, and this one's going to light Bueller. But this was my 3rd insight for this study. And I'll tell you what, I love doing these with Am and Topher. I think this is the highlights of my week. I loved this week's Come Follow Me. Like, I thought I love the story of Esther, and I absolutely had some 3 bangers for me personally. So I have no idea if anybody else is gonna, find them useful or interesting. But man, these have been really ones that have been on my mind. So this last one here, number 3. Once again, starting in the student manual, which seems to be my MO at this point. 31-10. Esther 4, 1 through 17. The question is, was Esther foreordained? The student manual says one of the hints of religiousness in the major characters of this story is given in Mordecai's challenging statements to Esther. Who knowest whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? It appears that an overseeing providence and purpose are implied, even though God is not explicitly mentioned here or elsewhere in the book. In other words, Mordecai told Esther that she was perhaps raised up at that time for that very purpose. It is also implied that Esther's beauty was a gift from God to put her in a position where she could gain the favor of the king and save her people. I don't know why this is gold here. So the end quote from the student manuals. And now my words. Why is it easier, I ask, for people to see things in hindsight versus when it is right in front of them? Why is it easier for members of the church to look, saints, to look at the past, look at the scriptures and go, oh yeah, that's the reason why it is. But then when they're looking at us today, it's hard for us to see things clearly. If someone like Esther, a woman without priesthood or office in the church, could be raised up to fulfill a specific calling of such importance, saving all of the Lord's people, why is it so outlandish to suggest that some today in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have been come for such a time as this? And I think bin is actually something that I probably would erase there. Why is it so outlandish to suggest that some today in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have come for such a time as this? That's better. Elder Nielsen, in his talk, This Is Our Time, said this: our Heavenly Father wants us to love ourselves, not to become prideful or self-centered, but see ourselves as He sees us. We are His cherished children. When this truth sinks deep into our hearts, our love for God grows. When we view ourselves with sincere respect, our hearts are open to treat others that way too. The more we recognize our divine worth, the better we understand this divine truth. That God has sent us right here, right now, at this momentous time in history, so that we can do the greatest possible good with the talents and gifts we have. This is our time. End quote from Elder Nielsen. Micah chapter 5, we read, and this man shall be the peace. When the Assyrian shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces, then shall we raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 principled men. In 3 Nephi chapter 24, we read, and then they that feared the Lord spake often one to another, and the Lord hearkened and heard, and a book of remembrance was written before him for them that feared the Lord and that thought upon his name. And they shall be mine, saith the Lord of hosts, in that day when I make up my jewels, and I will spare them as a man spareth his own son that serveth him. Then shall ye return and discern between the righteous and the wicked, between him that serveth God and him that serveth him not. Elder Heber C. Kimball said in his talk, the saints should prepare. He wrote, quote, take the boys here, the sons of our brethren and sisters, and you may cut them into inch pieces, and they will not forsake this cause. But they will defend it to the last. Some of them may be rough, and perhaps some of them do not pray much, but send them into the vineyard, and then you will see them show forth the power that is in them. At present, the prophet Joseph's boys lay apparently in a state of slumber. Everything seems to be perfectly calm with them, but by and by, God will wake them up, and they will roar like the thunders of Mount Sinai. There is much work to be done. God is not asleep, and he will wake up our children, and they will bear off this kingdom to the nations of the earth, and will bear testimony to the truth of this work, and of the integrity and true character of Joseph and Hiram and Brigham, of Heber, of Jedediah and the 12, and of thousands of others. There are trying times ahead of you. Do you not begin to feel and see them? If you do not, I say you are asleep. I wish that the Spirit rests upon a few. I wish that the Spirit which rests upon a few individuals could be upon you, every one of you. End quote from Heber C. Kimball. The Lord had Esther prepared to step forward and save her people. The Lord has a people that were likewise prepared to step forward today. Why is it so hard to see what is right in front of us? Do you not feel and see them? If you do not, I say you are asleep or have fallen back asleep. I too, with Elder Kimball, wish that the spirit which is resting upon a few individuals would spread like a fire and be upon every single saint of God.
Amen. Man, far out. I like that because that ties into like my first insight, and it's interesting right there that the Heber C. Kimball quote, which I'm assuming would have been quite a long time ago, you can actually see that Ezra Taft Benson's quote actually is kind of like a reword, like he's riffed off his quote, so that's really cool. But where was that line there? By the way, I like how you just cheekily threw a Micah passage in there. Just
No one's got to know.
Okay, so starting with, who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? And so Ezra Taft Benson's quote that I read, and he was saying that, for 6,000 years, and you've mentioned this before in some of your papers and your videos that and even we know, like Nephi in his vision, what he saw our day. But from the beginning of time, what have they always looked forward to? They've always looked forward to, it would have been the Savior's time, the coming of the Savior, but then it would have been his second coming, and the events and things leading up to that point. So we have been in the vision, in the crosshairs of everyone forever. If they've had the ability to see, we were in their sights. And I was just thinking about, there's like we said, we've covered a lot of things here, but there's no coincidences, right? No coincidences. There's no coincidence about the time we live in now. And I was thinking about Esther, and we know what she did, right? And the faith that she and Mordecai showed and did, right? And the works that the Lord was able to wrought through them. Mm-hmm. And did she expect it? Did she know? She probably didn't have any idea the day before this happened that she was going to be there as this instrument in the Lord's hands to fulfill this, or to save a whole race of people, basically. Mm-hmm. So we can see, like, to your end point there. Can we see? What have you got there? Are we prepared to step forward and save, like Esther, save her people? Do we see what's right in front of us? If we don't, we are asleep, right? Because we talk about this every week. What's coming? We see it. We see what's coming. Yeah. And we can also see and taste and feel potentially what some of our roles will be. We may not know exactly what it will be. Like Esther, she wouldn't have known exactly what the Lord would have had her do. She probably didn't really understand that she was foreordained to that, exact role. Her beauty was given to her, likely to put her in the position that she gained with the king. I mean, almost definitely was. That's what put her there, her beauty, and then her attributes as well. But it was the culmination of both of those things that put her in that exact spot. But she would not have known that was the case, until it sort of came. So we have this ability to look forward and to understand and to read the prophecies, to prepare, to know what's coming. So that we can be ready. And this is what I always say, is that I just want to be ready and be worthy to be a part of whatever it is. The Lord can use me in whatever way he wants, right? Whatever way that is. Am I foreordained to do something? Well, we all are, whether, how important you want to gauge that thing, right? But we're all foreordained for things. But I just want to be the worthy instrument in the Lord's hands to do whatever he has foreordained me to do. And that may be big, it may be small, but whatever it is, it's what he wants me to do. So that's all that matters. And then we, when the Lord's making up his jewels, as he describes it in that passage there, I can't remember which scripture it was, but he said it there in 3 Nephi 24. When the Lord makes up his jewels, if we've lived up to what he's put us here for, then that's it. That's all that matters. But can we see? I hope so. We cover this enough.
Yeah. I'd hope so too. I really hope so too. And because it's crazy to see what's happening and what's being fulfilled, and people who have taken the fruit, who have partaken of the fruit, becoming to be ashamed and going off to the great and spacious building, just like we've seen. Like, we know the prophecies, we know exactly what's going to happen. We have them all written there. Great big elders, that steal revelation, run off and try to take all the credit and all the glory. We have the patterns forever and ever and ever and ever. Like, they're right there. But, how many of us are actually going to just wake up and see and start actually putting themselves in these stories? Who do you want to be when you're looking at these stories? Because you don't just wake up one day and you're Esther. I'm sorry. You don't just wake up one day, oh, I'm Esther. No, you just don't. You don't just wake up one day and you're Mordecai. You don't just, oh, hey, bow before me or I'm going to kill you. And then you're like, what should I do? Like, there is a lifetime of decisions of who you are going to become. You are not a saucy, sexy, aggressive woman and then just decide, oh, I'm going to be Esther tomorrow. I'm sorry. It just doesn't happen. And you're not a faithless, lazy individual that just wakes up one day and it's like, oh, I'm going to be Mordecai. It's not the way it is. We have to actually become something. We need to actually become something. Yeah.
I like that analogy with the tree of life and the fruit, and that's how it feels to me as well. That's the perfect analogy for it. That's all these people that have tasted that fruit, the love of God, and they've had it their whole lives. This goes back to what we're talking about at the start, and then it's become the great and spacious building and the mocking of the world and the breaking down of the gender, like say gender roles or just whatever roles, any the family and it's become too much. The berating from that great and spacious building has become too much on these people, where they can't any longer. They don't have the what Mordecai had. They don't have what Esther had to stand up. Like, Esther had to walk into the king knowing that she could be executed for interrupting the king in his court, and she did it. And she said, "If I die, I die." But we've lost. We haven't lost it necessarily, but we're losing it. And who knows what the percentage of the church is, but it's. And again, people are going to comment on this and say, "Oh, we're so judgy." We're not judgy, right? Because we're living amongst it. We see it. We're not judging anyone, but what we're saying is that this is what we're kind of seeing in general terms. That as the mocking from the great and spacious building becomes more and more intense, which it is, some people are throwing away the fruit. It's too hard to stick with the morals that they once lived, like, and gay marriage is one of those, and that alone, I've seen actually many people now leave the church because they are condemning the church because they think the church is treating these people wrongly, which I can't agree, and I can't see that point of view, but it's what's happening, and that's just one example, but. We need to be stronger. We need to stay strong.
And we can make it about us. Yeah, people want to get upset and say, "Oh, you're judging other people." Make it about us. Micah, looking at these stories, wants to be like Mordecai, wants to be like Esther, right? I want to be like these people, and that's who I want to be like. And I know that you just don't wake up one day and become these people. You need to spend a lifetime of decisions every single day, making choices so that you become that type of person. Now, you don't act like Naaman. You don't Haman. You don't act like him your whole life, and then expect to sit down with Esther someday. Like that. So that's not judging. That's just or condemning. That's just an observational fact. And that's why we have all of these scriptures, so that we can look at them and go, who do I want to be like? Who am I in this story? You know, am I these people over in the great and spacious building mocking these people, or am I standing at the tree? Right? Am I Esther? Am I Mordecai? Who am I? Right? Am I the king? What am I? What do I want to be like? And what do I need to do in order to get there? And that's really important. That's really important.
And it's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. Yep. Well, it's been a good one. I like it. It's a good story. Be like Mordecai, be like Esther. Simple.
Amen. I feel like I am missing a good bit of metaphor. Like we did. It was an absent.
We had some good stories. And some. We had the children going to the pig farm.
Okay, that's pretty good. That was pretty good. Ammon, we love you.
Yeah, we'll see him next week.
We'll see you next week, buddy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today and talk about the gospel and talk about Come Follow Me this weekend. These are our 3 insights, things that we loved and we learned when we were studying this Come Follow Me this weekend. This week. We hope that all of you will take the time to read the reading section, the part that we've compiled for you with the scriptures and the Come Follow Me and the words of the manual. You'll come up with some wonderful inspirations from the Holy Ghost, inspiring you for giving you insights. And then we commit you to go off and share those with us, share those with your loved ones and family. Make what you're learning a part of your actual life. We feel so blessed, Ammon, Topher, and myself, to be alive in this day. We know that this is the day in which the Lord will perform his most wonderful works between now and when he comes again. And we are Zion or bust. We are Zion or bust. We know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the Lord's church. And we personally are doing everything we can to try to prepare ourselves and the world for the Savior's second coming, like our prophet, President Nelson, has told us to do. If you're interested in learning more or joining with us and sharing your insights and being a part of this community, we encourage you to check out Discord's Zion or Bust or Facebook's Zion or Bust. Links are always provided down below. Share your insights with us as well. Remember that Zion cannot be built up without a group of righteous saints who desire it, who actually want Zion, who actually want it, pray for it, and long for it with all their hearts. It cannot happen without you. Brothers and sisters, we are the
2 and 3
brothers. Minus one.
We love you.
We love you guys.
We love you all. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
All right.